A silent city of stone declares a ruler's authority for eternity. Royal tomb complexes are history's ultimate power plays carved in rock, monuments that did far more than provide a resting place. They redefined how power was displayed in death. By the end of this journey, you will understand the hidden language of these structures and how they shaped the destiny of empires. We will see how a mountain of stone became a machine for resurrection, and why an emperor buried an entire army underground. This exploration uncovers the architectural secrets and political genius behind these eternal statements. It reveals history not through words, but through staggering ambition made solid. What do you believe is the most powerful legacy a leader can leave behind? The funeral procession was the opening act in a drama meant to last forever. Think of it not as a somber march to a grave, but as the inaugural ceremony for a new kind of capital city. This city was not for the living. It was a permanent seat of government for the eternal self of the king, a place where his authority would be administered for all time. The simple burial pits of earlier rulers could no longer contain this ambition. Their resting places grew into vast complexes, complete with temples for ongoing worship, storerooms for eternal offerings, and housing for the priests who maintained the rituals. This transformation turned death from an ending into a perpetual state of royal operation. As the historian David O'Connor observed, the royal tomb was the node where religion, statecraft, and economics converged. It was a brilliant, if costly, piece of political theater. Building one required mobilizing thousands of workers, architects, and artists for decades. It demonstrated a ruler's absolute control over the nation's wealth and labor. More subtly, it showcased his unique relationship with the divine. By constructing a gateway to the afterlife, he proved he could command the gods themselves. The message to every citizen, noble and rival was unmistakable. A king whose power demanded a mountain of stone in death was a force beyond challenge in life. This theatrical principle, born along the Nile, would find its ultimate expression in a single structure so perfect and so audacious that it became the very symbol of an ancient world. The blueprint for this eternal power play was drawn in stone under the Egyptian sun. On the Giza plateau, the desert itself was reshaped into a declaration of divine kingship. The Great Pyramid of Khufu stands not as a lonely monument, but as the heart of a meticulously engineered complex designed for a single, staggering purpose. It was less a tomb and more a resurrection machine. Its sides align with near-perfect precision to the cardinal points, and its internal shafts point directly to key stars in the northern sky, particularly those the Egyptians associated with eternal life. The entire structure was a cosmic funnel, a device built to channel the soul of the god-king from his earthly form to join the imperishable stars, making his rule a permanent feature of the universe itself. But the message was for the living, too. The scale of the project was its own propaganda. Moving over 2 million stone blocks, each weighing several tons, from quarries across the Nile required an unprecedented command of logistics, labor, and the kingdom's entire economy. This was not hidden work. For decades, the plateau was a buzzing city of workers, engineers, and priests, a visible, daily reminder of the pharaoh's absolute power to reshape the world. The surrounding complex extended this statement. A covered causeway connected the pyramid to a valley temple by the river, where the king's final journey would begin. Smaller pyramids for queens and mastabas for high officials clustered nearby, creating a stone replica of the royal court, meant to function for eternity. The entire site declared that the pharaoh's authority was as immutable as the bedrock beneath it and as eternal as the stars above. This was the first great redefinition, setting a standard of ambition that would echo across continents. Yet, this model of overwhelming, singular display would soon be challenged by a different vision of power, one that found its strength not in a solitary peak, but in a hidden, sprawling city of the dead. While the pyramids spoke a language of cosmic permanence, a new dialect of power was being carved in marble on the coast of Anatolia. Centuries later, in a world shaped by Greek art and Persian administration, a regional governor named Mausoleum commissioned his final statement. The result was not a remote mountain of stone aiming for the stars, but a dazzling urban monument that celebrated the man himself. The Mausoleum at Halicarnassus, a tiered temple of gleaming white marble adorned with sculptural friezes and capped by a colossal chariot, stood proudly in the city center. It was less a secluded gateway to the afterlife and more a permanent centerpiece of civic life. Here, the display of power underwent a profound shift. Instead of solely emphasizing a divine right to rule, Mausoleum, through his widow and sister Artemisia, who oversaw its completion, chose to emphasize personal glory, cultural sophistication, and artistic genius. He hired the most celebrated Greek architects and sculptors of the age. The building's friezes did not just show quiet rituals, they vibrantly depicted scenes from Greek mythology and likely dramatic battles, telling stories of heroism that implicitly linked the ruler to legendary figures. As the scholar John Boardman noted, this structure effectively Hellenized the concept of the hero tomb. It merged the Persian tradition of royal grandeur with the Greek pursuit of ideal beauty and public art. The message was clear: a ruler's legacy could be measured not just by the territory he controlled, but by the beauty he commissioned and the cultural capital he bestowed upon his people. His memory would be maintained not by secretive priests in a desert complex, but by every citizen who walked past this breathtaking site, a constant reminder of the patron who made their city magnificent. This was power redefined as a gift of art and civic pride. Yet, this very concept of a lavish, above-ground monument would soon be turned completely on its head by an emperor who believed true power in death required absolute secrecy and an entire subterranean world. Yet a ruler in ancient China took this concept of a guarded eternity to its most literal and astonishing extreme. Far from the gleaming marble of a city center, the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang, orchestrated his final act of power not by reaching for the heavens, but by building an entire empire underground. His tomb complex is not a single monument but a vast, hidden mirror of his realm, a testament to a new definition of authority based on absolute control, bureaucratic precision, and a profound belief that his rule was simply too important to end. Beneath a man-made mountain of earth lies a microcosm of his world. Ancient texts describe rivers of mercury flowing through a bronze-scaled landscape, palaces filled with treasures, and the entire apparatus of his government ready to function in perpetuity. But the most staggering evidence of this ambition was discovered by farmers in the 1970s, just over a mile from the central mound. There, they unearthed the silent, subterranean army of the terracotta warriors. Over 8,000 life-sized clay soldiers, each with unique facial features and arranged in precise military formation, stand in eternal vigilance. They are flanked by chariots, cavalry, and even clay officials and acrobats. This was not a monument for public admiration. It was a functional military garrison and civil service, buried in secret to protect and serve the emperor forever. This complex represents a seismic shift in how power was displayed in death. Where the pyramids showcased a cosmic connection and the mausoleum celebrated public art, Qin Shi Huang's project was an act of paranoid, meticulous replication. His power was defined by the total administration of life, and he demanded that same control over the afterlife. The sheer scale of labor involved, with an estimated 700,000 workers toiling for decades, demonstrated a terrifying command of human resources. More importantly, it revealed a philosophy where the state itself was an extension of the ruler's will, a machine so perfect it had to be preserved intact, even in the dark. The message was chillingly clear. His dominion was not a temporary condition but an eternal fact, so absolute that it required its own duplicate world, sealed away from the living. This obsession with a hidden, guarded eternity stands in stark contrast to tombs designed for pilgrimage, creating a legacy of mystery that only deepens with each new discovery. Yet the most profound statement of power can sometimes be a whisper, not a shout. Centuries after the pyramids pierced the skyline, Egypt's pharaohs made a startling strategic retreat. They abandoned the glaring desert plains for a hidden, silent valley carved deep into the limestone cliffs of Thebes. The Valley of the Kings represents a brilliant and desperate redefinition. Here, royal authority was no longer proclaimed by a mountain visible for miles. Instead, it was encoded in secrecy, protected by labyrinthine tunnels, and painted on the walls of sunless chambers. This was power displayed through absolute inaccessibility. For a new kingdom ruler like the young Tutankhamun, the greatest threat to eternal rule was not a challenger's army, but the quiet work of tomb robbers in the night. A hidden tomb was a fortress, its location a state secret guarded by a special police force. The very geography became part of the monument. The barren, sun-scorched cliffs were not a backdrop. They were a natural barrier, a sacred and forbidding landscape that declared only the most privileged could ever enter. The power was in the knowing that unimaginable wealth and the divine body of the king lay within, forever just out of reach. This shift from conspicuous consumption to concealed security reveals a changing world. The relationship between the king and his people was now mediated by mystery and protected by rock. Yet, within these hidden tombs, the display of power turned inward, becoming a cosmic roadmap. The walls were not left bare. They were covered from floor to ceiling in vibrant, intricate art, spells from the Book of the Dead, and scenes depicting the sun god Ra's perilous nightly journey through the underworld. The tomb was no longer just a resting place. It was a guidebook and a battery of magical insurance for the pharaoh's own dangerous voyage alongside the gods. His power was now demonstrated by his mastery of this sacred knowledge and his intimate passage through realms no living person could ever see. Just across from this valley of secrets, another approach to power in death took shape in the brilliant sunlight. At Deir el-Bahari, the female pharaoh Hatshepsut built a mortuary temple of such stunning elegance it seemed to grow from the cliff face itself. Her power was displayed not through hidden chambers, but through breathtaking architectural harmony. Her colonnaded terraces, aligned with precise symmetry, stepped up toward the towering rock, creating a dialogue between human artistry and natural grandeur. It was a statement of graceful, assured authority, one that claimed legitimacy through beauty and order rather than just brute force or secrecy. Together, the hidden valley and the elegant temple show us the two faces of this era's power in death, one concealed in shadowy peril, the other exalted in harmonious light. This dance between concealment and revelation would find its most complex expression not in a desert, but in the heart of a living city, where an emperor tried to solve the eternal problem by building his tomb at the very center of daily life. But how do you display power when your dynasty is meant to last 10,000 years? The answer lies in a valley of profound stillness, far from the frantic energy of the imperial capital. North of Beijing, along the slopes of the Tianshu Mountains, a procession of 13 man-made hills rise from the earth. These are the Ming Tombs, and they represent a masterful redefinition where power is expressed not through a single, staggering monument, but through a serene, unbreakable chain. The Ming vision was one of dynastic eternity, and they built their final statement accordingly as a complete sacred geography. It began with the founding emperor's tomb, the Xiaoling, which established a template so perfect it would be followed for centuries. The genius of this complex was its total harmony. Architects and planners did not fight the landscape, they consulted it. Using the ancient principles of feng shui, they selected a site cradled by protective mountains to the north, with a gentle river flowing before it. This was not just a pretty view, it was a cosmic blueprint. The tomb was positioned to gather the vital energy of the earth and sky, ensuring prosperity and stability for the dynasty forever. Power here was displayed as being in perfect, unshakable tune with the natural order itself. Approaching this power was a ritual of awe. Before you ever saw a tomb mound, you walked the spirit way. This long, ceremonial road was lined with silent, colossal stone sentinels. Pairs of mystical animals like elephants and killins stood watch, followed by rows of imposing civil and military officials. They were not just decorations, they were the frozen, eternal bureaucracy of the empire. The message was clear. The emperor's administration, his entire system of governance, did not cease with his passing. It continued its silent vigil, maintaining order in the afterlife just as it had in life. This walk was a physical journey through the very idea of the state. Each subsequent emperor was then laid to rest in his own tumulus, a great earth mound planted with trees to appear as a natural hill, placed carefully along the valley according to seniority. Individually, each tomb was a statement of imperial authority. Collectively, they formed a lineage carved into the land itself, a visible chain of succession that reinforced the family's sacred mandate of heaven. Power was no longer the domain of a single, godlike individual, as with the pharaohs, but a systematic, inherited duty embedded within the Confucian order and the very contours of the earth. This created a legacy of stability so powerful it feels permanent even today. Yet, this concept of a tomb integrated into a living, breathing landscape would find a startling echo in a very different culture, where an entire city was built not just around a tomb, but because of it. But what if the most powerful statement a ruler could make was to erase his own name from the monument? Walk down the immense central artery of Teotihuacan, the Avenue of the Dead, and feel the geometric shadow of the Pyramid of the Sun fall over you. This is likely the tomb of a sovereign, a mountain of earth and stone constructed with staggering precision. Yet history holds no record of the king who built it. His name, his face, his personal triumphs are utterly absent. This is not an accident of time, it is the entire point. At Teotihuacan, power in death underwent a radical sixth redefinition. Authority was not personalized, it was absorbed by the city-state itself, becoming an anonymous, immortal force. The complex is the city, and the city is the complex. Unlike a secluded valley or a walled necropolis, the Pyramid of the Sun is the pulsating heart of a meticulously planned metropolis, its base aligned with the urban grid, its orientation set to celestial events like the sun's passage on specific days. The ruler was buried not in a remote sanctuary, but at the very core of civic and cosmic order. His tomb was less a memorial to a man and more a permanent engine for the universe. Archaeologists have found evidence within the pyramid's foundations of a solemn ceremony. Offerings were placed there, not personal treasures, but symbolic items and the remains of warriors and animals. This practice points to a profound belief. The ruler's ultimate power was his role as a sacred conduit. Through rituals and his final resting place, he channeled sacrificial energy to nourish the gods and maintain the balance of the cosmos itself. His legacy was not a list of conquests carved in stone, but the continued rising of the sun, the turning of the seasons, and the thriving of the city that bore no individual's name. In this system, anonymity was not a loss, it was the highest achievement. By subsuming his identity into the institution and the cosmic cycle, the Teotihuacan ruler achieved a form of authority that was unassailable. He became synonymous with the eternal order he served. This stands in stark, quiet contrast to the ego-driven mountains of Giza or the artistic glory of Halicarnassus. Here, power was displayed through self-erasure, proving that immortality could be found not in a personal name, but in becoming an inseparable part of the world's eternal rhythm. This philosophical departure from the cult of the individual would eventually circle back, however, in a form so lavish and personalized that it would come to define an entire continent's vision of royal eternity. The Mississippi River once flowed past a city that rivaled London in its time. On its eastern bank, across from modern St. Louis, rose a landscape entirely sculpted by human hands. At its center stood Monk's Mound, a colossal earthen platform 100 feet high, its base covering over 14 acres. This was not a tomb for a single king, but the seventh great redefinition of power in death, where authority was built from the soil itself. The rulers of Cahokia, the great metropolis of the Mississippian culture, displayed their power not by sealing themselves away in stone, but by becoming part of the living, breathing heart of their community. Their final resting places were often within these very mounds, but the monument was far more than a grave. It was a permanent stage for the sacred and the social. Building Monk's Mound required moving over 22 million cubic feet of earth in woven baskets, one load at a time. This was a communal act of faith and labor, orchestrated by a leader whose influence was measured by his ability to inspire and organize thousands. The power was in the collective creation. The mound itself served as an axis mundi, a sacred center point connecting the three realms of existence. Its flat top held temples and the homes of the elite, physically and symbolically closer to the heavens. Its sides were the earthly plane of daily life. Its foundations, rooted in the ground, reached into the underworld. A leader buried within this structure did not depart from his people. He took a permanent seat at the very crossroads of the cosmos. His power was displayed through ongoing presence. Every sunrise over the vast plaza, every ceremony on the summit, every glance toward that immense, grass-covered pyramid reaffirmed his enduring role as the spiritual anchor of the world. This was power expressed as a gift of sacred geography. It transformed the entire floodplain into a ritual landscape where the ruler's legacy was the community itself, gathered and sustained around the earthwork he inspired. It asks us a profound question: can a leader's greatest monument be the shared sense of place he leaves behind? This idea of power embedded in a living landscape would find a starkly different, yet equally brilliant, expression in a place where death was not a quiet rest within the earth, but a spectacular, fiery ascent into the sky. Beneath the sun-baked plains of southern Iraq lies a different kind of statement, one written not in stone or earth, but in gold, music, and a profound, unsettling loyalty. In the royal cemetery of Ur, dating to around 2,600 years before the Common Era, Sumerian rulers redefined power for an eighth time. Here, authority was displayed not through cosmic architecture or hidden cities, but through a spectacular, theatrical consumption of wealth and life itself. To enter one of these tombs is to step into a carefully staged final act. A king or queen was laid to rest not alone, but at the center of an entire court frozen in time. The most staggering discovery was the so-called Great Death Pit. Archaeologists led by Leonard Woolley in the 1920s uncovered a chamber where not just treasures but people were interred. Dozens of attendants, soldiers, and musicians, dressed in their finest regalia and bearing cups, were arranged in orderly rows. Forensic evidence suggests they voluntarily consumed a sedative or poison, choosing to follow their ruler into the next world. This was the ultimate display of command, the power to inspire a loyalty so absolute it transcended life itself. It communicated that the ruler's social bonds, the very fabric of his or her court, were not earthly contracts but eternal covenants. Alongside this profound social statement was an avalanche of material wealth meant to dazzle both the divine and the historical record. The tombs overflowed with objects of breathtaking craftsmanship. Headdresses of delicate gold leaves and lapis lazuli beads, ceremonial daggers with hilts of lapis and gold, and intricate gaming boards have all been recovered. Perhaps most evocative is the lyre of a bull-headed instrument with a sound box decorated in shell and lapis mosaics depicting mythological scenes. This was not mere treasure hoarding. Each item served a purpose in the afterlife, ensuring the ruler would continue to enjoy music, play games, and appear resplendent before the gods. The use of lapis lazuli, a stone imported from distant Afghanistan, shouted of far-reaching trade networks and economic might. This was power made portable, a king's entire economy and cultural sophistication packed into a single chamber to secure his status for eternity. The message was brutally clear. A ruler's worth was measured by what he could take with him and by who chose to follow. This spectacle of conspicuous consumption set a precedent that would echo for millennia, from the treasure-filled tombs of Mycenae to the lavish burial practices of later empires. It presents us with a difficult legacy where breathtaking artistic achievement is forever intertwined with a final, solemn act of service. This Sumerian vision of death as a magnificent, populated procession stands in stark contrast to the next great redefinition, which would find power not in taking everything along, but in leaving almost everything beautifully, hauntingly behind. The vibrant afterlife was a banquet that never ended. In the rolling hills of central Italy, the Etruscan elite carved their vision of eternity directly into the soft volcanic tufa rock. Their tombs were not towering pyramids or hidden valleys, but something profoundly intimate and social. They built underground palaces designed as perfect replicas of their luxurious homes above ground. Walking into the necropolis of Servitory is like entering a silent, stony neighborhood, complete with streets, small piazzas, and rows of circular, house-like tumuli. This was the ninth great redefinition, where power in death was displayed as the eternal preservation of domestic bliss and aristocratic privilege. For the Etruscans, the tomb was not a departure from life, but its ideal continuation. Step inside one of these rock-cut chambers at a place like Tarquinia, and the walls come alive with color. Frescoes depict scenes of unparalleled joy, musicians playing the lyre, couples dancing with graceful abandon, and lavish banquets where guests recline on couches, sharing food, wine, and conversation. This is a startling contrast to the perilous, spell-guarded journey through the Egyptian underworld. Here, the afterlife is a perpetual symposium, a celebration of sensory pleasure, music, and community. The message about power is clear. A ruler's or noble's authority was demonstrated not by cosmic alignment or military garrisons, but by their unchanging right to the finest things in life. Their status, their family lineage, and their role as generous hosts were the core of their identity, and they built structures to ensure that identity lasted forever. The tomb was a domestic space for the entire clan, a place where generations would be reunited in everlasting comfort. It emphasized continuity, hospitality, and a deep-seated belief that the social hierarchy of the living world was a natural and permanent order. This celebratory, almost tangible view of the hereafter deeply shaped the culture that would eventually absorb them. The Roman concept of the ancestral tomb, the importance of the familial feast, and even certain funeral practices can trace a direct line back to these painted chambers of eternal leisure, proving that power could be most effectively stated not with intimidating scale, but with an invitation to an everlasting party. Yet on the windswept plain of Pasargadae, a different kind of statement stands in quiet defiance of all that came before. It is a simple, elegant structure of pale limestone, a modest house with a gabled roof resting atop a six-tiered platform. This is the tomb of Cyrus the Great, and it represents a 10th revolutionary redefinition of power. In a world where rulers built mountains to touch the gods or sealed entire armies underground, Cyrus chose startling, deliberate simplicity. After forging the largest empire the world had yet seen, stretching from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River, his final monument could be walked around in a minute. The power here was not in overwhelming scale or hidden treasure, but in the profound confidence of restraint. Ancient historians like Arrian recorded an inscription that was said to be there, a message to any who approached. It read, "Passerby, I am Cyrus, who founded the Persian Empire and was king of Asia. Do not grudge me this monument. The voice is not that of a distant god-king, but of a man speaking directly to a traveler. It is an appeal for respect, not a demand for awe." This was power displayed through perceived humility and a direct connection to the people. Cyrus cultivated an image as a philosopher king, a just ruler who respected the customs of the lands he conquered. His tomb, isolated and unadorned, perfectly projected that ideal. It suggested that his true legacy was not locked in a chamber, but lived on in the stability and tolerance of the empire he built. The enduring power was in his deeds and his reputation for wisdom, which needed no extravagant architectural proclamation. In fact, the very austerity of the structure became its own potent symbol of Persian imperial identity for centuries. Later Persian kings made pilgrimages to the site, and Alexander the Great, upon conquering Persia, paid his respects and ordered the tomb restored after finding it had been disturbed. The monument's simplicity commanded reverence from the most powerful men in the world because it spoke a quiet truth. True, enduring authority could reside in moral legacy, not just in the weight of stone. It was a radical idea that a ruler's greatness could be measured by the monument he did not build, by the wealth he did not bury, and by the direct human words he left for a stranger passing by on a lonely plain. Yet within the ancient walls of Jerusalem, a tomb that never held a king's body became the most fought over piece of real estate in history. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre stands as an 11th radical redefinition of power, where authority was no longer built from the ground up, but seized and sanctified through the control of a single sacred death. This was not a monument to a pharaoh's cosmic journey or an emperor's replicated world. It was an architectural war over narrative, a sprawling complex constructed not to house a ruler's remains, but to possess the spiritual weight of the most significant passing in the Christian world. Byzantine emperors, beginning with Constantine the Great's mother Helena, initiated a staggering project. They did not just mark a site, they physically carved it out of the bedrock of a pagan temple, building a magnificent rotunda, the Anastasis, directly over the supposed tomb of Christ. Their power was displayed through an act of sacred archaeology and lavish patronage, asserting the emperor's role as the defender of the faith and the direct heir to a divine story. Centuries later, Crusader kings, having violently captured Jerusalem, poured further wealth into the church, adding a grand Romanesque choir and transepts. Their additions were not mere renovations, they were stone proclamations of a new, militant protectorate over Christianity's heart. For a European monarch to fund an altar or a chapel here was to buy a permanent share in this holiness, broadcasting their divine right legitimacy back home. The message was profound. Ultimate power could now be displayed not by building your own eternal house, but by architecturally dominating a pre-existing, universally revered resting place. The focus shifted decisively from the individual ruler's journey to the afterlife, to their earthly role as the guardian of a faith-based empire's most potent symbol. The church itself became a frozen conflict, its space divided and subdivided among competing Christian denominations, each chapel and altar a testament to centuries of political and theological struggle for control. This complex teaches us that in an age of faith, the most powerful tomb might be one you did not build for yourself, but one you could forever claim to protect. But what if a tomb was designed not for solemn awe, but for serene delight? In the heart of a bustling Indian city, a different kind of power is inscribed in the precise geometry of water and greenery. The Mughal emperors, descendants of Timur and Genghis Khan, brought a 12th redefinition to the landscape of death. They transformed the tomb complex into a charbagh, a Persian-inspired paradise garden. Walking through the grounds of Humayun's tomb in Delhi is an exercise in experiencing a perfect earthly heaven. The entire site is a vast quadrilateral, divided by walkways and, most importantly, shallow water channels into 4 equal parts. These channels represented the 4 rivers of paradise described in the Quran. The central white marble mausoleum where the emperor rests is not an isolated destination. It is the crowning jewel in a meticulously planned oasis of order and beauty. Power here is displayed as the divine ability to recreate paradise itself. The Mughal ruler demonstrated his refinement and his favor with the divine by taming nature into a symbol of eternal bliss. He controlled not just armies, but the very elements of shade, water, and fragrant blossoms, arranging them into a living painting of the afterlife. This was a deeply public statement. Unlike the secluded Valley of the Kings or the hidden tomb of the first emperor, these gardens were meant to be enjoyed. Nobles, scholars, and common citizens could stroll the shaded paths, listen to the gentle sound of flowing water, and find respite from the heat and chaos of the world. The emperor's legacy, therefore, was not one of fear or mystery, but of benevolent order and aesthetic perfection. He offered every visitor a physical glimpse of the peace and refreshment promised in the next world, implying that his just rule on earth was a mirror of that heavenly order. The tomb itself, often placed at the precise center of this symmetry, became less a monument to loss and more a focal point for contemplation within a living gift to the people. This vision of power as a creator of peaceful, public beauty would find its ultimate expression in a monument so flawless it seems to have descended from a dream, the Taj Mahal, where this garden tomb ideal reached its breathtaking zenith. That single word, mausoleum, is his most enduring monument. We began with the mausoleum at Halicarnassus as a masterpiece of public art, a statement of cultural power. Yet its final, most profound legacy is not in its lost marble, but in our language. This is the 13th redefinition of power in death, where a ruler's personal name is detached from its original stone and mortar to become the very definition of the thing itself. Mausolus achieved a form of immortality no pharaoh or emperor could engineer through architecture alone. He accomplished a complete linguistic conquest. His specific tomb was so staggering, so definitive in its ambition, that its name became the generic term for all grand, imposing tombs that followed. Think of the gravity in that. Alexander the Great's tomb is lost, the first emperor's mound remains sealed, but every time someone, anywhere, points to a stately tomb in a cemetery and calls it a mausoleum, they are unconsciously speaking the name of a regional governor from the 4th century before the Common Era. They are invoking his memory. This is power displayed not through scale or secrecy, but through cultural legacy and semantic embedding. It represents a shift in ambition. The goal was no longer just to build the greatest tomb, but to permanently define the category. Mausolus and his queen Artemisia succeeded in branding eternity. They set a precedent where a ruler's fame could become so intertwined with their final monument that the two become inseparable in the human imagination. The physical structure in Halicarnassus eventually crumbled, its stones repurposed for other buildings and even ground into lime mortar, but the concept it embodied was too powerful to fade. It was adopted by the Romans, woven through medieval Latin, and passed into modern languages, carrying the echo of that one man's ambition into everyday speech across the globe. His power is now exercised in a whisper, a subtle, constant reminder that the most permanent throne is not carved from rock, but from the dictionary itself. This quiet, pervasive influence asks a compelling question. What greater victory is there than to have your name become synonymous with the ultimate house of eternity for all who come after you? The creak of oars falls silent as a dragon-headed longship is pulled ashore for the final time. This is not the prelude to a raid or a voyage of discovery, but a solemn 14th redefinition of power. In the fjords of Norway, at sites like Oseberg and Gokstad, Viking chieftains and queens chose a vessel as their eternal home. A powerful woman, perhaps a queen or a volva, a Cyrus, was laid to rest within the graceful curve of the Oseberg ship. She was surrounded by an astonishing array of treasures, carved wooden sledges and a ceremonial cart, the bones of more than a dozen horses and oxen, and even a single female attendant. Then the entire ship was buried beneath a towering mound of earth and stone, becoming a permanent island in the landscape. This practice transformed power into something mobile and adventurous. The tomb complex was not a fixed palace or temple, it was the ship itself. This was a monument built for motion, a statement that a ruler's authority was born from maritime mastery, long-distance trade, and the warrior culture of exploration. The vessel that had carried them to wealth and renown across the known world would now carry them on the ultimate journey. The burial sent a clear message. In death, they would not simply rest, they would continue to command, navigating the seas of other worlds as they had the North Sea. Their power was inseparable from the technology that defined their civilization. The ship was both a symbol and a functional vehicle for the afterlife, packed with everything needed for status and travel in the next realm, from practical tools to exquisite tapestries. It displayed a legacy of reach, suggesting that the greatest leaders were those who could steer their people and their own souls toward uncharted horizons. This vision of a mobile, journeying eternity stands in stark contrast to the rooted, earthly pyramids or the hidden, static valleys. It asks us to consider a leader's legacy not as a fixed point on a map, but as the enduring wake of a voyage that never truly ends. A humble fisherman's grave became the bedrock for a throne. Deep below the marble floors and golden mosaics of St. Peter's Basilica, in a place archaeologists call the Vatican Necropolises, lies a simple 1st-century burial site. Tradition holds that this is the final resting place of St. Peter, the apostle whom Jesus called the rock upon which he would build his church. This belief, more than any army or treasury, fueled a 15th monumental redefinition of power. Here, authority was displayed not through a single ruler's monument, but through a relentless, centuries-long act of architectural accumulation and spiritual succession. Each pope, viewing himself as the direct heir to Peter, sought to honor that legacy by building upon it, literally and figuratively. The power was in the layers. First, the Emperor Constantine built a grand basilica directly over the venerated spot, aligning the might of the Roman Empire with the growing authority of the Bishop of Rome. Then, over 1,000 years later, Renaissance popes demolished that aging structure to raise an even more colossal church, its dome designed by Michelangelo dominating the Roman skyline. Later, Bernini added his vast, embracing colonnade, creating a public square that felt like the arms of the church itself welcoming the world. This was not a tomb complex built in one lifetime, but one that grew like a living organism, each addition a new chapter proclaiming the unbroken line from a simple fisherman to the spiritual leader of millions. The message was profound. Temporal power could fade, but spiritual authority, built upon this sacred foundation, was eternal and ever-expanding. The humble grave was the nucleus, and the staggering basilica was the physical proof of the empire it spawned. This continuous enshrinement turned memory into mandate, transforming a site of quiet devotion into the very engine of a global religious institution, proving that the most potent power can sometimes be the power to build upon a single, sacred story for generation after generation. Gold can speak a silent language of command. On the arid northern coast of Peru, a civilization known as the Moch built their seats of power not from stone but from sun-dried mud brick. At the site of Sipán, their rulers were laid to rest within the very platforms that formed the foundations of their temples. These were not towering pyramids aiming for the heavens, but intimate, layered chambers that contained a 16th, breathtaking redefinition of power. Here, authority was displayed not through the architecture of the tomb itself, but through the spectacular regalia placed within it. The tomb was a vault, a sacred locker holding the uniform and toolkit needed to perform the office of ruler for all eternity. When archaeologists carefully excavated the burial of the figure now called the Lord of Sipán, they found not just a man, but a walking institution cast in precious metal. His face was covered by a magnificent gold nose ornament. His head was crowned with a complex headdress of gold and silver. His hands held scepters topped with intricate miniature scenes of ritual combat. Every piece was a masterpiece of metallurgy, depicting supernatural beings, warrior priests, and complex symbolic narratives. This was power made material. Each ornament was not merely decorative, it was a functional component of his identity, a necessary piece of ceremonial equipment that enabled him to communicate with the gods, command his people, and embody the myths that held his society together. Without these objects, he could not be the ruler. The tomb, therefore, was less a final resting place and more a permanent armory for the afterlife, ensuring the Lord could continue his sacred duties without interruption. This concept extended to his entire court. The burial platform was a layered reflection of Moch society. In adjacent chambers and at different levels, archaeologists found the remains of warriors with their copper weapons, priests with their ritual paraphernalia, and even wives or attendants, along with symbolic offerings like llamas. This was not a mass act of loyalty as seen at but a structured, deliberate burial of specific roles. It painted a picture of a rigid, hierarchical world where power was so specialized and so dependent on a supporting caste that the entire system had to be preserved intact. The message encoded in gold and silver was clear. A Moch lord's authority was inseparable from the objects he wore and the people who served his office. His legacy was the perpetual performance of a ritual drama, with every actor, prop, and costume sealed in adobe to guarantee the show would go on forever under the Peruvian sun. Granite mountains hold a different kind of silence. In the stark, windswept highlands outside Madrid, King Philip II of Spain built not a tomb, but an entire worldview in stone. El Escorial is a fortress of faith and intellect, a 17th redefinition where a king's final resting place became the central pillar in a living machine for ruling an empire and securing a soul. This was no secluded mausoleum or paradise garden. It was a vast, severe grid of grey granite that functioned simultaneously as a royal palace, a grand basilica, a monastery for Hieronymite monks, a world-class library, and a school. The power here was displayed as total, integrated control over every facet of existence: the spiritual, the political, and the intellectual. Philip II, the self-styled Rex Catholicus, designed his legacy to be a monument to orthodox devotion and enlightened governance fused into one unshakable block. At its somber heart, beneath the high altar of the basilica, lies the royal pantheon. This octagonal chamber of dark marble and gold is the literal and symbolic foundation of the entire complex. The kings and queens of Spain were interred in ornate sarcophagi stacked in vertical columns, a silent, eternal dynasty supporting the structure above. To reach the palace halls or the basilica's nave, one literally walks above this repository of royal remains. The message was architectural theology. The king's authority in life and his hope for salvation in death were built directly upon the lineage of his ancestors. His governance and his piety were two sides of the same sacred coin. The tomb was not an end point, but the load-bearing chamber of a continuous state. This holistic vision extended into every corridor. The magnificent library, with its vaulted ceiling painted with allegories of knowledge, held thousands of manuscripts and forbidden texts, showcasing the crown's commitment to learning within the bounds of approved doctrine. The monastery ensured a perpetual cycle of prayers for the royal family's souls, turning devotion into a ceaseless administrative task. El Escorial presented kingship as a solemn, all-encompassing duty. Power in death was redefined as the ultimate integration. The ruler did not depart to a separate eternity. He remained embedded in the perpetual workings of the empire he shaped, his physical presence anchoring a system designed to administer both worldly power and otherworldly grace. It was a cold, magnificent vision of control, suggesting that true legacy was not a single monument, but an entire operating system for civilization, carved in granite and sealed with prayer. The river was the problem. Where the Minjiang, Dodu, and Qingyi rivers converged below the cliffs of Sichuan, their waters collided in a violent, churning fury that made navigation impossible and claimed countless boats. A Buddhist monk named Hai Tong saw this not as a geographical fact, but as a spiritual challenge. His response was an act of engineering so audacious it became an 18th redefinition of power. He would not build a tomb, he would become one. Hai Tong vowed to carve a statue of the Buddha Maitreya so immense that its serene presence would calm the waters forever. For decades, beginning in the early 8th century, he oversaw the work, his vision literally taking shape from the living rock of the cliff face. When he passed away, his followers interred his remains within the still unfinished statue, sealing his physical self into the heart of his own monumental creation. The Leshan giant Buddha, standing 71 meters tall, is thus a tomb, but one that utterly dissolves the traditional concept. Here, power is displayed as the total subjugation of nature for public good and spiritual merit. The monument was not a sealed chamber for a king's journey, but an open-faced, functional tool for the community. The belief held that the Buddha's presence would pacify the water spirits responsible for the deadly currents. Astonishingly, the project may have worked through sheer geological intervention. The massive amount of stone excavated from the cliff was strategically deposited into the river, altering its flow patterns and inadvertently taming the worst of the rapids. This created a profound blurring of lines. Was it a tomb? Yes, for Hai Tong. Was it a monument? Obviously. But it was also a civil engineering project, a work of devotional art, and a permanent public guardian carved from a mountainside. The power demonstrated is one of selfless transformation. The monk architect's legacy is not a hidden crypt, but the peaceful passage of boats on the river below, and the awestruck faces of pilgrims looking up. His authority came from redirecting the destructive force of nature into a protective, benevolent stillness, proving that the greatest act of power might be to make yourself a permanent part of the landscape, not as a conqueror, but as a calming stone sentinel for all who pass by. Yet a final journey across the sea would seal his legacy in stone. For nearly 2 decades, Napoleon Bonaparte rested in a simple grave on the remote island of St. Helena, a prisoner of his final defeat. Then, in 1840, a remarkable political theater unfolded. A French king, Louis Philippe, orchestrated the return of the emperor's remains to Paris. This was not a quiet repatriation. It was a grand national spectacle, a 19th redefinition where power in death became an act of historical reclamation. The state itself was displaying its ultimate authority, the power to rewrite a narrative and repurpose a memory for unity. Napoleon would not be buried in a secluded crypt, but enshrined as the centerpiece of the nation's military heart, under the golden dome of Les Invalides. The architectural statement here is one of layered reverence and overwhelming scale. To reach the emperor, you descend from the bright, ornate church into a solemn circular crypt. There, at its very center, rests a massive sarcophagus carved from a single block of deep red quartzite, a stone chosen for its rarity and imperial weight. It is not placed directly on the floor, but atop a grand pedestal of green granite, itself set within a pit so that visitors must look down upon it from a surrounding balcony. This design creates a powerful feeling of awe and containment. You are not at eye level with the man, you are in a position of observation, of respectful distance. The sarcophagus is encircled by 12 massive statues of victory, each representing one of Napoleon's most celebrated campaigns. The message is meticulously crafted. This is not merely a tomb, it is a reliquary for the idea of French grandeur itself. The power on display belongs less to Napoleon the individual and more to the French state that chose to bring him home. By monumentalizing this deeply controversial figure, the government performed a masterful act of political alchemy. It transformed a symbol of traumatic revolution and costly war into a focal point for patriotic pride. The complex at Les Invalides, with its museums and military hospital, frames the tomb within a continuous story of national service and sacrifice. A visit becomes a pilgrimage through a curated history where the emperor's remains serve as the ultimate artifact. This redefinition shows us that a tomb's greatest power can lie in its ability to reconcile a fractured past. It demonstrates how a state can wield architecture and ceremony to absorb a turbulent legacy, smooth its edges, and place it under a permanent, gilded dome, forever cementing a chosen version of history into the national consciousness. The ultimate secret remains locked beneath a silent, grassy hill. For all the staggering revelation of the terracotta army, the heart of Qin Shi Huang's ambition has never been seen. The immense central burial mound, described in vivid detail by the Han Dynasty historian Sima Qian, has been deliberately left untouched by modern archaeology. This is not due to a lack of curiosity, but a profound respect for preservation ethics and a sober awareness of the potential dangers Sima Qian himself warned of, including rivers and seas of mercury. This deliberate inaction creates a 20th and perhaps final redefinition of power. Here, authority is displayed not through what is revealed, but through what is permanently withheld. The greatest strength of the Chinese state is demonstrated in its ability to keep its founding emperor's deepest mysteries forever intact. Think about that for a moment. In an age of satellite imaging and ground-penetrating radar, where few secrets seem absolute, this earthen pyramid represents an unbreachable frontier. The power lies in the enforced mystery, in the eternal aura of hidden knowledge. It transforms the mound from an archaeological site into a monument to pure potential. Every whispered description from Sima Qian of a bronze-scaled landscape, of starry ceilings, of the emperor's body adrift on a mercury stream, gains immeasurable weight because it lives only in the imagination. The unopened tomb becomes a more potent symbol than any excavated chamber could ever be. It commands a different kind of respect, one rooted in awe for the unknown. It tells us that the most complete display of control is the power to declare something forever beyond reach, to make a ruler's final enigma so vast and so delicate that the world agrees to simply let it be, sealed under a quiet hill for all time. Long before the first stone was laid at Giza, a different kind of mountain rose from the green fields of Ireland. Newgrange is a massive, rounded mound of earth and white quartz stone, older than the pyramids and Stonehenge. Its power display was not one of military might or personal treasure, but of cosmic alignment and communal effort. This was a 21st redefinition, where authority was demonstrated through a profound understanding of the sky and the ability to unite an entire community in a single, breathtaking purpose. For most of the year, the inner chamber of this passage tomb lies in deep, silent darkness, but for a few precious minutes at dawn on the winter solstice, something miraculous happens. A precisely engineered roof box above the entrance captures the year's weakest sunrise. A narrow beam of golden light creeps slowly down the long stone passageway, finally flooding the central chamber with radiant light. This was no accident. It was a feat of Neolithic engineering and astronomical observation so precise it staggers the modern mind. The individual or group who commanded its construction displayed a power that was literally otherworldly. They were not just chieftains, they were intermediaries with the cosmic forces that governed life itself. Their authority came from proving they could literally harness the sun at its lowest ebb, the darkest day of the year, and bring its light into the realm of the ancestors. This celestial theater sent an undeniable message. The ruler or priest-king held the secret to the turning of the world, to the promise that light and life would always return. The power, however, was deeply communal. Building Newgrange required moving enormous stones from distant locations and assembling thousands of tons of earth and rock. This was not the coerced labor of a vast empire, but the coordinated effort of a whole society united by a shared spiritual vision. The tomb complex, part of a larger ritual landscape that includes similar mounds at Noth and Douth, became a permanent anchor for that community. It connected the living to their ancestors buried within and to the life-giving sun above. The glory was not for a single name to be remembered, but for the entire community to witness a miracle they had built together. In this ancient corner of the world, power was redefined as the sacred orchestration of connection, binding the people, their past, and the heavens into one eternal, illuminated moment. White marble holds a memory of dawn. The Taj Mahal is a love story written in stone, but to see it only as a romantic gesture is to miss its deeper political architecture. This is the 22nd redefinition, where absolute imperial power is framed not through fear or conquest, but through the overwhelming, humanizing force of personal devotion. Emperor Shah Jahan built the complex as a tomb for his favorite wife, Mumtaz Mahal, following her passing during childbirth. Yet, the staggering effort he poured into it over 2 decades, involving 20,000 artisans and a fortune that nearly emptied the imperial treasury, was a masterful display of statecraft. By channeling his profound grief into the world's most beautiful building, he performed a brilliant act of political theater. He transformed raw, personal loss into a public symbol of his own capacity for deep feeling, making his imperial authority seem more human, more relatable, and therefore more deeply resonant with his subjects and rivals alike. The power was in the aesthetic and emotional alchemy. The perfect symmetry of the complex, from the reflecting pools that double its grandeur to the flanking mosque and guest house, spoke of a ruler who could impose divine order on the chaotic world. The intricate Pietra Dora inlay work, using thousands of semi-precious stones to create delicate floral patterns, demonstrated access to global trade networks and a courtly refinement beyond compare. Every detail, from the calligraphy praising Mumtaz to the garden layout representing the Islamic paradise, served a dual purpose. It honored a beloved individual while showcasing the emperor's unlimited resources and his role as a patron of divine beauty. This created a new benchmark for legacy. A ruler's name could now be immortalized not just by the lands he won, but by the depth of feeling he could express in architecture. The Taj Mahal presented a vision of power that was aesthetic, emotional, and divinely inspired, suggesting that the greatest emperor was also the most devoted lover, his heartache forever frozen in flawless marble. It asks us to consider whether the most enduring throne is sometimes built not from ambition, but from a love so vast it required its own perfect world to contain it. A different kind of social register was kept in the cool, dry air beneath a Sicilian monastery. For over 300 years, the Capuchin catacombs of Palermo offered a singular, stark service to the city's elite. It was not a traditional tomb, but a meticulously curated exhibition where the final display of power was the preservation of the self. Wealthy citizens, clergy, and professionals could pay for their bodies to undergo a specialized preservation process. They were then dressed in the finest attire of their era, from elegant gowns and tailored suits to clerical vestments and military uniforms, and arranged upright along the underground corridors. This practice created a silent, startling assembly, a frozen parliament of the deceased. The catacombs became a three-dimensional census, a physical archive of the city's social structure. Corridors were segregated with precise, unyielding order. Men were separated from women. Lawyers stood in their own section, soldiers in another. There was an area for virgins, denoted by special symbols, and a distinct space for the clergy. Even within death, the rigid hierarchies of profession, gender, and social class were scrupulously maintained. This was power redefined as perpetual social performance. In life, these individuals had used clothing, bearing, and title to signal their place in the world. In death, they invested in a process that would continue that signaling for centuries. Their authority was displayed through an enduring, visible presence within the community's collective memory, refusing the anonymity of decay. The catacombs functioned as a macabre but powerful mirror. For the living who visited, it was a sobering lesson in social order, a tangible map of Palermo's power structure cast in a solemn, silent medium. It demonstrated that the human desire for recognition could extend beyond the grave, transforming the body itself into a final, lasting testament to status. This chilling gallery asks us where the line lies between memorializing a life and curating a permanent social facade. It reveals a world where the greatest fear was not death, but invisibility, and where power meant ensuring you would forever be seen, exactly as you wished to be remembered, in a silent city of your peers. A name is not required for a legacy to be monumental. In the aftermath of the First World War, a conflict of unprecedented scale, nations faced a profound and haunting question. How do you honor a loss so vast it defies individual recognition? The answer emerged in a new form of sacred ground, the tomb of the unknown soldier. From the hallowed floor of Westminster Abbey in London to the serene slopes of Arlington National Cemetery outside Washington, D.C., this practice became a 24th redefinition of power in death. Here, authority is no longer displayed through the glorified biography of a king or emperor, but through the anonymous, collective sacrifice of the ordinary citizen. The tomb complex is often stark in its simplicity. A single slab of marble, perhaps adorned with a timeless inscription, rests above a body deliberately chosen because its identity is lost. This anonymity is not an absence but the source of its immense power. It allows every family who lost someone to that war, whose loved one never returned home, to see their own father, brother, or son in that silent crypt. The monument draws its strength from collective national mourning, transforming personal grief into a unified public ritual. This act performs a profound transfer. It takes the monumental architectural language once reserved for pharaohs and emperors, the eternal flame, the honor guard, the sacred, guarded precinct, and bestows it upon a single, nameless individual who stands in for millions. In doing so, the modern state makes a powerful assertion. It declares that its legitimacy and its strength are built not from a single ruler's divine right, but from the willing sacrifice of its common people. The state becomes the inheritor and the solemn curator of a legacy built by countless anonymous lives. This democratizes the very concept of the heroic tomb. No longer is eternal honor reserved for those who commanded armies from palaces. It is now accessible to the soldier in the trench, the sailor at sea, the airman in the clouds, whose name is known only to their family and to history. The ritualized changing of the guard, the precise, unchanging routine, mirrors the eternal vigilance once promised to a god-king, but here it is a promise made by the living to the dead. This shifts the focus of power entirely. It suggests that the most resilient state is not the one that builds the tallest pyramid for its leader, but the one that proves, through perpetual reverence, that no sacrifice made in its name will ever be forgotten. The tomb whispers that true national power resides in memory, and in the humble, powerful admission that sometimes the most important history is written by those whose names we will never know. The stone walls of Great Zimbabwe hold no spells for the afterlife. Instead, they trace the boundaries of a thriving, earthly kingdom, a 25th redefinition where power was displayed through secular prosperity and masterful administration. This complex of granite enclosures rising from the southern African plateau speaks a language of trade, defense, and living authority. Its crown jewel, the Great Enclosure, is a vast, elliptical space defined by a towering, mortarless wall. The stones are fitted together with such precision that not a blade of grass could slip between them, a testament to generations of skilled craftsmanship and organized labor. This was not a monument to a solitary god-king's cosmic journey, but the functional and symbolic heart of a state built on gold. The ruler here derived his power not from an exclusive claim to the divine, but from his control over the lucrative trade routes that connected the interior goldfields to ports on the Indian Ocean coast. The immense walls, the largest ancient structure in sub-Saharan Africa, served a dual purpose. They provided formidable defense for the royal residence and the kingdom's wealth, and they projected an image of unshakable stability and technical prowess to any visitor or rival. Within these spaces, the realms of the living and the honored dead were seamlessly integrated. While the exact locations remain debated by scholars, it is likely that royal resting places were situated within or adjacent to these enclosures of power. This was a profound architectural choice. It meant the ancestors were not secluded in a distant necropolis, but present within the very courts where daily governance, trade negotiations, and judicial matters were conducted. The king's authority was thus reinforced by a continuous, tangible connection to his lineage, blending ancestral legitimacy with contemporary economic might. The message carved in granite was clear. True power resided in the ability to build a lasting, prosperous state in the here and now, to command the resources and loyalty that raised these silent, staggering walls, and to weave the memory of predecessors directly into the fabric of a living, breathing capital. Their silence is the loudest statement of all. From the geometric audacity of the pyramids to the hidden chambers of the first emperor, from the paradise gardens of the Mughals to the anonymous tombs of unknown soldiers, these complexes are history's ultimate canvas. They were never just about providing a resting place. They were masterpieces of political theater, carved in stone, earth, and marble to project an idea of power that would outlast empires. Each one is a concentrated answer to the deepest questions a civilization could ask. What do we fear? What do we worship? What do we, as a people, aspire to become in the eyes of the gods and of history itself? The architecture of these places reveals everything. A society that builds a mountain to touch the stars is declaring a cosmic ambition. A culture that lays its ruler to rest within a bustling city center is weaving authority into the fabric of daily life. A state that invests generations of labor into a hidden, subterranean army is prioritizing eternal security over public glory. How a civilization chooses to bury its greatest leaders is a direct reflection of how it understands the very nature of rule, the soul's journey, and the meaning of a legacy. These silent cities and sculpted mountains show us the birth of architecture as a language of statecraft. They were the engines of entire economies, mobilizing thousands, directing rivers of wealth, and perfecting crafts that would define their age. They are, in the most literal sense, the frozen dreams of immortality. A pharaoh dreamed of sailing with the sun god. An emperor dreamed of administering an eternal empire. A Mughal king dreamed of walking in a perfect paradise, and they used every resource at their command to build a world where that dream would be made permanent. So the next time your gaze falls upon a monumental structure from the ancient world, pause for a moment, look beyond the stone and the scale, ask yourself the deeper questions. Whose power was this built to proclaim? What vision of eternity was it meant to secure? And what does its enduring silence still shout across the ages to us today? If this journey through the architecture of eternity has intrigued you, there are always more mysteries to uncover. Consider subscribing for more explorations into the hidden stories of our past. And we would love to hear your thoughts. In the comments below, tell us which tomb complex you find the most powerful and why its message still resonates.